And I think there are 6 of us still.
Oh, there's only 5 of us.
Oh, I wonder. I came in here a little earlier. I hope that's not me. Here twice.
Uh-oh. That would be funny.
That would be.
Everybody says
You're all here. Yes, we are.
Oh, there we go. Now
Okay.
Oh, there it goes.
The numbers.
Yeah.
We're going to give folks about another 45 seconds to trickle on in.
Hello, start talking Techie to me.
We surely will. Okay, I do not want to run into the next conversation, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Super excited to be with you guys all today. Hassan, thank you for bringing this group together. We appreciate that. That is important. So my name is Sean Connor. Professionally, I've had the joy of working at senior levels of government, both at the state level, federal level, and some household tech names like Uber and Apple, and recently at a startup named Lime. So if you've been on a scooter, you're welcome. So I'm so excited about today's panel. Our conversation will focus on career building strategies for those who want to break into tech, work in a startup, go freelance, or join a top tech company. Getting into tech, especially if you're a career changer, is definitely a journey, and staying and growing in the sector often takes what feels like a whole different set of skills and abilities. My hope is that this conversation does a few things. It demystifies, it encourages, and it explains. And while we will focus on what individuals can do, I think it's important to provide some context. It's the why behind the why. So 3 stats. 2020 McKinsey report found that firms that are ethnically diverse at the executive level were more likely to financially outperform those without. 2019 U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation report cites, quote, studies have shown that companies that formalize their inclusive workplace practices, they improve their financial standings in both real terms and compared to those in their industry, end quote. And then lastly, a recent survey by Accenture also found that consumers not only expect retailers to engage in conversations around social issues, but that inclusion and diversity directly influence their purchasing behavior. So this is a dollar and cents conversation. Companies do better when they have queer people of color, trans folks, LGBTQI folks, and the data says that. So now on to the broader conversation. And I want to center it around a modern day philosopher named Jay-Z, who said in a record named Oceans that he did with queer artist Frank Ocean, if I'm going to make it to a Billy, I can't take the same route. And I believe that that's true now more than ever. So here to help us dissect this conversation are Melody, Dwayne, Enrique, and Selena. You can read more about them online. In a nutshell, Melanie, wave your hand, is a product owner and strategist at Elephant Ventures with over 15 years of experience in project and product management combined across technology, digital health, banking, marketing, nonprofit spaces. And prior to her current role, she was VP of product at Include.io, an inclusive recruitment tool for diverse technical talent. Dwayne Sands, wave your hand, is a graduate of HBCU, Norfolk State University. He is an avid esports competitor and software engineer. 4 years ago, he moved to LA, and he currently works for Riot Games as part of their player platform division. Enrique is, wave your hand, is currently serving as creative director of global brand marketing at Instagram, where he leads multiple global brand initiatives, performance marketing campaigns, and product launches with internal teams, as well as managing the external creative agencies. Selena, wave your hand. There we go. We got a cadence here. Is the director of product management at Bricks Labs, a software development and AI firm. She's grown various brands and products as well as teams for the past 10 years in a wide variety of sectors, including solar, gig economy, fintech, consumer goods, DTC, market research, online media, and medtech. She's also a Google Maps alum. So before we jump in, I'm going to ask the kind of simple question. Are you in tech? I'm typing as we go. Start the poll. And while we're waiting for that, let's go ahead and get started. And throughout the conversation, feel free to do two things. One, either drop in your LinkedIn profile so we can begin to connect with each other throughout this conversation. And then also think about your questions. We'll turn over to some audience questions soon. But the opening conversation is, just so folks know, about 62.96, so about 63% of folks are in tech, and some of you are not. So we are hoping to get you over here. The first question for everyone is, each of us has been in tech for a while. What surprised you about getting into tech, and what surprises you today? Melanie, if you want to take it. Melanie?
I think for me that it's still challenging to get into tech. I think I felt that before,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel that now. I feel that despite the increase in accessible tech programs, there's boot camps, the digital landscape has shifted, but yet I feel like as an industry, we're not at a zero loss for innovation or pipeline. So it shouldn't be as difficult as it is to sometimes break into tech. And I think despite the fact that we have increased opportunity and access, the door still feels very much closed to underrepresented groups in tech. And I feel we've made great strides, but I felt that 20 years ago or so when I was getting into tech, and I still sort of see those challenges persisting today. So that's an area that I think is still somewhat surprising for me.
Great. Selena.
Unmute myself. With tech, what surprises me really is when I first got into it is the ability to climb within an organization and also have influence and change. Even as someone, for me, when I started working in beginning of startups with solar, I was able to climb from someone that knocked on doors to running all of talent acquisition for a VC-backed startup, and I was 21. So that's something that was really cool to see. Now, after 10 years in tech, probably just the lack of diversity and executive leadership still, and then also just the visibility in low-income areas and low-income schools. I think that if we had more visibility, if we were investing into the resources that they're able to utilize, like even just computers, that we would be able to build up that pipeline a little bit faster. So,
Great. Enrique.
Yeah, am I unmuted, hopefully? There's a lot of things that are surprising about tech. I think I'm very fortunate that I didn't have too much of a struggle. I think I was at the right place at the right time. But once I was in, I'm going to echo a lot of the same things that the folks here are saying. It's like there's a very, very almost rigid way of doing things. It's, people say like, oh, that's the way we do it in tech. I'm like, but do we always have to do it that way? I think there's I think a little bit of a resistance to change, which is very old world, which is interesting to see that in the new world, right? That's my biggest observation. I think that even people like myself, I am in the door, but I'm making more waves than I'm making friends right now because I am questioning a lot, and I'm going to continue to question. And it probably will affect how I move up the chain. Do I move up the chain? Because at the end of the day, it's still a very sort of traditional system. So yeah, I think it's the traditional part that still needs a lot of work. Needs to shake up.
Thank you, Dwayne.
Can you hear me? I think we're good. I think it's definitely it feels very. I'm going to echo what Enrique said. It's very old world in a lot of the attitudes and a lot of the cultural norms. And I think what's really important is to be super vigilant, and we do kind of have to push back really courageously. And that can be tough because you do feel isolated, and you want to make those changes because you're cognizant of, the capacity for change and like a responsibility on your part. But yeah, it can be uncomfortable, but it's necessary. And I think ultimately we have to be like really uncomfortable in order for real change to happen. And so I think the hardest part for me is becoming comfortable with this way, and just recognizing that, hey, I'm going to say something. It's probably not going to go over well, but more than likely it will shift things in the room, and it will at least enter the conversation, and the goal is achieved.
Great. Enrique, for you, what's needed to increase the number of queer and trans people of color and women folk in tech? So I want you to pull on that thread a little bit. And as you think about this, who's out there doing smart stuff that's caught your eye? And if there's no one, say no.
No, I mean, there's definitely a few things to talk about. I think don't underestimate the power. Like, if you're in the door working for a tech company, that's a huge responsibility. Aside from your day-to-day job, it's a huge responsibility. So, do whatever you can, ruffle as many feathers as you need to make change. I'm currently part of 3 different, I would say, groups within my organization that are all just, spare time sort of initiatives. So I'm part of the LGBTQIA, Latinx, Black at IG. Just continue to change the system. Every little bit counts, because I think, you're only going to make things better for those that come after you. I'm always constantly trying to brainstorm with as many colleagues as possible. Like, how do we change the system? I'm talking to people on how to change the bias videos, for example. Like, these bias videos that we have are very, very outdated. So, like, thinking of ways of updating that, thinking of ways of changing even the way you input your data. I still have to choose whether I'm male or female. What? Even that alone needs to change. So every little bit counts. And then, just thinking of the future, like, if I'm able to at least change the gender norms as you're getting onboarded, that's huge. That's huge. So just continuing to do that. And I think in terms of people that have caught my eye, tech specific, I think, Angelica Ross, what she's doing, I think is unbelievable. Trans tech social enterprises. I mean, it's like, yes, like, if I didn't already love her enough, like, this is just even more amazing. So I'm currently trying to find ways of seeing what she can do for us in our company. Can she do something? Would she be willing? And vice versa. So fingers crossed on that.
Fingers crossed. So my next follow-up is for everyone, and we'll start with Selena here, is today there are so many great podcast websites, thinkers, and even Instagram pages dedicated to growing our piece of the pie in tech. What's one thing you're reading, following, or listening to that you want to share with the group? You're on mute, Selena.
There we go. To be honest, lately I have been really focused on product lately, as I'm doing a lot of product deliveries. But as far as consuming content, I've been consuming a lot of content from a lot of different, like, Latinx Instagram, like, leaders and Twitter influencers. One in particular is Eliana. I think her Instagram is In My Element. I'll post that in the messages, but I know she does an incredible job of covering not only Latinx, but more of the Black queer people of color and the intersectionality of everything. And Also, there's a new book in machine learning, since I work in machine learning, that's going to be published, which I'm pretty excited about, and I've already subscribed to get it. It's called Uncovering Bias in Machine Learning. It's going to be published by Wiley Publishing, and I think her name is Aodell. Her Twitter is DataSciBay. Oh yeah, you know that one. So I'm really excited for that. I really like, for me as someone in AI machine learning, I know there's a lot of bias in the models, and especially with training, and that there's so many different layers to that as well. I mean, there's hiring the right data trainers, Black data scientists that can train and bring in the right data to properly train for all different scenarios. So that's what I'm excited to read about.
Great. Melody, you go next.
Sure. So I've been reading this book. It's an author, it's upside down, I know, but the author is Carissa Thacker. It's called The Art of Authenticity. So it does a lot of exercises for senior leaders to talk about the way that you lead. It really holds a magnifying glass. And I think it was important to pick up this book, and because employees today are different. They're different than the employees 15 years ago. We come in with a demand for honesty, for transparency, for collaboration, and we will not back down. And leadership has to follow suit with that. So this book is really taking a magnifying glass to the way that I lead my teams. And it kind of allows me to pick myself apart to a degree and focus on things that I might be overlooking or maybe lurking in the shadows. And I think, and I'm halfway through it, some of the end of chapter exercises that it makes you do, it's holding me accountable for how I maintain my set of guiding principles and the values that I have, and how is that represented in the way that I lead my team. And I think it forces us to take a step up in the way that we perceive team building, especially now with being able to nurture the talent that we retain that is diverse. So now that I've got them in the door, how do I make sure that the environment I'm providing is nurturing? And how do I ensure that I'm providing a pathway to them growing and myself growing in the same way? So this is a really cool book. I've been really enjoying that.
Thank you. Enrique, if you'd go next.
Gosh, what can I say? I think, podcasts are kind of all over the place. I think some relevant ones. I think The Read, Today Explained, Business of Fashion. I know they're trifling, but I think often fashion, only in certain aspects of fashion, are the first to sort of take a leap in certain directions. So that always fascinates me. Impact Theory, Latino USA, Recode, Decode, La Culturistas. And then in terms of Instagram obsession, for me, it's very culture driven. So lots of photographers, lots of music, style, artists. Yeah.
Great. And Dwayne. And you're on mute.
Man, I am king of this. So I'll say this. There's a billion podcasts, websites, thinkers, and Instagram pages that I feel like have just sprung up out of nowhere. And it's really refreshing. There's people like Amigos Code on YouTube who I follow, who's really exciting. He's a software developer, I think based in either Paris or London. And what's so cool about his content is, one, he's Black, and he's also Muslim. And so his content just it just comes from a different angle, and it feels very refreshing to get that kind of representation, really out in the world space and under light. What I've been working on in particular is something that I actually stumbled on, and it's called Liberating Structures. And what's so cool about it is it's a concept for how to have conversations that are more inclusive. I hesitate to use the word truly, but I think more inclusive. So it really comes at it like, how can I attack the ways in which we make decisions and the ways in which we work together to make sure that all voices are heard, highlighted, and actually are part of the solution? So there's like an example of something called like a 1, 2, 4 all, where there's a question posed to the team, your team at work. And so you start with an individual answer to that question, and then you pair with someone in 2, and then you answer that question again, you compare notes. Then you come back together as 4, and you're answering and comparing notes. And the answer is evolving as you go, right? But it's taking on all of the different voices in the room to really arrive at a conclusion. And then ultimately you come together with all, and now you have this really it just keeps it from being a situation where there's the loudest voice in the room, and then there's the quietest voice in the room, and one of those dominating the space more so than another. And I think I'm really interested in finding ways to do that, because when we're Black or queer or otherwise like marginalized, we don't necessarily want to speak up. We don't want to be singled out, and this really kind of gives you an opportunity to really the team to take ownership of making sure the space is safe.
Mute.
We've got about 15 minutes, so I'm going to lightning round us through some things. Selena, talk to me about, and I hate this phrase, but it's what all folks are talking about these days, personal brand, right? What's a part of it? How do you nurture it? How do you balance it with your day job? How's it important for those folks who are breaking into tech or doing freelance work? So if you want to talk about that personal brand space.
Yeah, and especially if you're getting into freelance work, I think it's really important, one, to kind of start more on a holistic level of like, what are your values? What's your purpose? What do you care about? What motivates you to do great work? And, especially you need that when you're connecting with potential customers and clients. So I know for me, I started that when I got to college. And I realized as someone, I'm a Dell scholar, so I went on scholarship and everything like that to a private university. And I knew I had a lot of privilege in order to do that with my education. And so I figured out kind of, if I'm going to use my privilege and education and I'm paying for all this, I want to use it for good. And so I realized, like, what do I care about that I'm going to attach myself to and really mold who I am. And discover who I am too. So I started that with Athlete Ally, which is huge now, but I was one of the very first clubs, and a Great American Condom Campaign, so very sex positive. And so I started to develop and learn how to brand myself and market through their brands, and then that's how I discovered who I was. And so that's how I found my voice. And then as you find your voice, you're able to go out and talk to strangers and be very comfortable in that atmosphere. And once you're able to establish relationships and build rapport with customers, you're also able to interchange all the values and the things that you care about, mutual interests, so that's how you can get your first clients, and then you can build referrals off of that. And that's how a lot of agencies start off with just, I got my first client, and then word of mouth, and then that's when you actually establish your sales funnels. So it's providing kind of this quality stamp that you provide that people can expect to get when they're engaging or working with you. Great.
Melody, this panel is a mix of creatives, technical and non-technical folks. One of the things I've heard a lot about, and in 2020 want to jump in on, is soft skills. So what are the soft skills? And for those who, to put a bucket to it, it's communication and social skills and personal attributes. Do you see in greatest demand and in greatest need for our sector right now?
A couple of things. One is being able to ask the right questions. And I know that is because when I started off as a hands-on engineer, we're really tactical, right? We're here to code a solution. We're here to deliver the solution. But we don't really know the why, the bigger picture around why we're doing what we're doing. So I think it's important to understand that before we start building anything, whether it's a piece of software or we start building upon our career path, you have to get into the essence of what you want to achieve and be able to ask the right questions to answer that. A secondary thing is shifting between the tactical mindset and a strategic mindset. So there's a place for both, right? But not having both to me is a detriment. I think when early on in our careers, we are very tactical. You know, we set an objective, we have a strategy to obtain the objective. But as you grow in your specialization in tech, and you need to start to shift to a strategic mindset, you know, and start paying attention to the whole organization, especially people who are impacted by changing technology. And it's more about the why things get done and less about the details of how and who is getting it done. And you don't have to wait until you're in a senior leadership role to adopt this mindset. I think that's really important. And then emotional intelligence. Oh my God. Yes, please. I mean, that is really, really important. So the self-awareness, what am I good at? What am I not so good at? And then the self-management. How can I manage my emotions, especially in stressful, critical situations? You gotta have that. And then social awareness. So once you've got the emotions under control, you gotta be able to read the room. You gotta be able to recognize others' emotions and the dynamics that are in play within your own team and your own organization. And you will use all of that to your advantage. These skills, I think, are in super high demand. And that's really what's necessary as you grow and you enter that leadership role or C-suite role and beyond.
Couldn't agree with you more. So to make this interactive, if folks want to put in their number one soft skills that folks in tech need to focus on in 2020, go ahead and start dropping that in. Dwayne, I recently saw this question on LinkedIn and thought it'd be a good one. What should job seekers be doing during the summer holidays? And I think it also holds true for COVID in some ways, that many businesses have slowed down from time to time during the summer due to the holidays or long vacations or just planning what they're needing to move forward. How should job seekers navigate these slow periods? I'm on mute telling you that
everyone wants to get away during the summer and leave town and go hang out, and they don't want to answer those emails from those people who are so interested in working for their company, but they will. So I think it's important to do a bunch of things. You can be very targeted in your networking. You can focus on who you think are the influencers, who are the decision makers in your industry, and you can either follow them passively or you can start to engage them really and try to have a conversation. If someone works at a company you want to work at, it's perfectly fine to reach out and say, hey, I would love to learn a little bit more about your experience at this org, or company. So can we set aside a little time to talk? These are the reasons that I'm interested in the company, just to build like a very personal reason, why for you're interested in that company. The other thing is, you mentioned online learning, and with the summer months, yeah, if it's slowing down on the leads turning into actual like interviews, you can definitely use that time to go back and look at sites like Pluralsight, Coursera, Udacity, Udemy, and really just skill up in ways that you either have identified through some research maybe you've done that says, I know that these skills are in demand at the company that I want to work at. And the last thing that I'll say is, with the company research, you not only want to focus on what it is they're doing, you want to focus on why they're doing those things. Focus on their values. Make sure that you have alignment with the values that you hold are aligned with the company's values. Because if there's a clash, you're going to walk in the door and you may hate it very soon, because you'll be like, well, these aren't the things I want to go after, or I don't agree with why we're doing the things that we're doing, and I have different ideas, and you're going to just butt heads. But I think if you make proper use of that time you have, that downtime, then you can really have an advantage when hiring picks back up.
Thank you so much. Want to remind folks, this is the moment where you should start dropping in your questions. We're going to try transitioning to audience questions in our last 8 minutes. So while you're doing that, this next question is for everyone. And we'll start with Enrique here. What's one piece of advice or action you'd give for folks as they either get into tech or go to startup or embark on freelance work?
I think I think it's do the research. Do the research on the company, because I do think that, for example, founder-run companies run drastically different than, brands that have already or companies that have already IPO'd and kind of have more of a corporate system in place. I think really knowing how they operate from the inside is key to your approach. So I think doing that proper research would be like step number one. That'd be like the top of the list. And obviously, like, does this company align with your personal ethos, your goals, your person? Does it align with your?
There you go, Melody. Let's go with you next.
This is a little of a tough question for me. I honestly think that know your style. I find that sometimes when I first started working, I assumed that I was fit for a large corporate conglomerate, right? That's what I was headed there. It took me 7 years to realize that, no, I'm actually cut out for a much smaller enterprise. And so it has to do with look at the organizational structure and look at, as Enrique mentioned, look at the company's values. Because you don't feel that until you start to define your own. So really know yourself, know your style, know what's important to you, and make sure that when you're out there looking for a job, you're not only looking for the money, how much it's paying me, and where could it take me, but more so, how does this fit with where I am now, where I want to go? How close in alignment is this role to where I want to be and what I feel? It's incredible how important this subject is, and it's something that often gets overlooked and is an afterthought, and it causes a lot of discomfort as you continue your career. You start to feel it more the longer you are working in tech. You feel it more. So making a priority, do that first thing.
Thank you. Selena, you're up.
Yeah, I mean, everyone is saying everything spot on. I kind of have to echo what Melody is saying. You really need to just take the time to get to know yourself. That is something that a lot of people kind of rush through and just want to get a job and get out there. And especially like for new grads, I get that. And you definitely need experience, but trying to find experience or like internships, even that you're passionate about whether that's your values or initiatives that you care a lot about, and really honing in on like what she said about style. Working for a huge corporation isn't for everyone, and startups also definitely is not for the faint heart. So, if you're not willing to do a lot of like extra work and time and really put yourself in a position, especially when you work for startups where you're responsible for a lot, that you really need to do that internal work. And if you're not ready for it, don't go there yet, and really spend the time to make yourself the best version that you can be. So when you get the opportunity, you're ready. So.
There we go. And we've got 4 minutes, and Hassan will not yell at me for starting the next session late. So, Dwayne, if you want to throw in a quick answer, then I'm going to ask 2 audience questions, and then we're going to round this out.
Nah, I really don't have anything to add to that. I think it was covered well.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you, brother.
Thank you.
Brandon asked the question specifically to the women on the panel. In tech companies, almost 1/3 of underrepresented women of color are passed over for promotions, more than other groups. To the women on the panel, how do we move forward with that? How do we move forward and navigate this? Excuse me.
I've had to own my own success path. I think relying sometimes on the company to provide that for you is not necessarily the best strategy. So I had to kind of just define, what do I need to feel successful? So what do I need to accomplish? And I kind of chart out my own path. And the company that I work for is involved in this path, but it's not exclusive to that. So I go out and I find coaches and mentors that I think are going to propel me forward. I deliberately insert myself into discussions like this and others that are in my wheelhouse of interest and push me to new levels. And I start creating that learning path for myself. So I've learned to take accountability for where I want to drive myself. And hopefully the firm I work for is a partner with me on this. But don't let that be the end all. Don't fully rely on that basket. Craft your own path. And hopefully your company and you work together to sort of define that path upward. And sometimes it doesn't always come from your company, and that's okay. but you still have to own that for yourself.
Selena, anything to add there?
Yeah, definitely. To echo what Melody is saying, I'm just thinking about it. Almost every single position since over the last 10 years I've created it, other than, me working at Google Maps. So whether I worked creating this with a founder or, as more of an entrepreneur type, where I created new positions and new programs from scratch. Those are things where you just have to be assertive. You have to not overpower, but you kind of, to an extent, have to overpower other voices, especially a lot of more white men in the room where it's majority, and you have to assert yourself so that they know that you're there, and so that they acknowledge your presence. It's really weird, and I don't like it, but I've gotten used to it, and it's made me a lot stronger because of it. And so it's also able to help me equip people that I'm working with and mentoring and interning to find their voice and be assertive too. Because I think that, as a leader, as a woman leader in executive leadership, it's our responsibility also to find that outside mentorship, not relying on the companies because we just know it's not there. So, and that just depends on, if you work for a startup or a corporation. So.
And we've got 20 seconds left. So we have done the work, and we have gotten more Black folks, brown folk, women folk, gay folk, trans folk, pansexuals, and everyone in our community. Enrique, you get the last word. What do we need to grow them, to keep them, and to promote them when they've gotten to when they've joined our ranks?
Man, I think nurturing them. I think if you're a person of color and you see another person of color, whether they're trans, whatever the case may be, take them under your wing, because you just never know how you can help them. They might just need a helping hand. They might just need somebody to talk to. They might need somebody to look at. That's all. And that gives them the confidence to promote themselves, to lift themselves up. And I think, having allies and creating allyship with people in power is so, so, so needed. You can't underestimate that. You can't underestimate that. The first thing I did when I walked into the doors at IG is just reaching out to as many people as possible. And I took as many coffee dates as possible. Get to know people, get to know your environment, find those allies, stick with it, and just pull people up with you. Pull people up with you. If you see them, pull them up. Pull them up.
There we go. Thank you guys and gals and folks for such a great conversation. As we transition to the fireside chat, as the moderator, I have a lot of thoughts about all of these questions that I asked, hence I asked them. And so I'm going to take a point of personal privilege. 2018 study by Seattle-based PayScale found that about 35% of all employees at tech companies got there through referrals. So there's something we can do today, right now, immediately, and that's referring the hell out of smart, dope, queer people of color to the companies that we're in to be able to make this progress. So I'm now going to turn it over to our last session, Rejection to Rejuvenation, a candid fireside chat with Arlen Hamilton and Blair Amani. And even as we're in these wild times, there's an opportunity for creativity and leadership. And so I'm going to end with trans tech social entrepreneurship founder and actress Angelica Scott Ross said something at Lesbians Who Tech this week that really jumped at me. And she said, from the margins is where the greatness comes from. The mainstream is always behind. So we have the role to be able to be pulling folks in from the margins and doing that creative work and bringing in folks. So thank you so much, Hassan. I'm going to turn it over to you now. Thanks.